Okay, so first I'm going to walk you through what we're going to show, so you can kind of keep that in mind as a roadmap, and then we'll walk through it. So the scenario here, right, so for those of you who have participated here, this is a text messaging app. It's basically, it's kind of a survey questions app, and you'll fill in the answers, and then that data comes into this system, and then as it saves it, it actually pushes it through OSDI to two different systems. And in this case, it's the NGP band and Action Network. And so what we're going to do is we're going to walk through what is the experience from, let's say, the guy or girl at the customer organization to do this wire up, right, without having to depend on the vendors. So what we're doing first is we're going to use what we'll call the standardized integration panel for OSDI. All systems that do OSDI are going to expose the same user interface for the plug board and wire up scenarios. So we'll identify the endpoints we want. So we've created a form on an Action Network for the caucus check-in. We'll find that endpoint, and then we'll plug that into the app, where we're going to define a set of integration peers and then data path connections. And then we're going to, once we have that done, we're going to look at the results inside of VAN and Action Network. All right, so this is the Action Network form in the Action Network UI, what we created for this check-in. Now we're going to look from the HAL browser point of view. So this is the standardized API console, the integration panel that all servers will have. And so the first thing that comes back when you connect to it is what we call the API entry point, which lists the different collections that are available on the server, and because of the standardized user interface, it can prettify that and make it easy. And so we're going to go look at our forums collection. Right now we're going to look for the forum that I just showed, which is this one here. So it's the first one. We'll go to the submissions collection. And here we have the record submission helper. And that's what we're going to put into the integration peer on the app. So I've already prepared this in advance. So here, now we're inside of the text messaging app. Right, so this is the script that you all answer. Right, so we're going to go over here to integration peers. Right, so we've defined one for Action Network and for NGP. So we'll take a look at that. Right, so basically that URL, that sign up helper URL, that's actually plugged in here, along with the API token. And the same thing for VAN. So in the VAN side, right, so here, this is their OSDI endpoint. It's on osdi.ngpvan.com. Still a very alpha state. They're working on it, so the developers have been working hard to make the right pieces work for the demo, but they don't actually have the helper listed here, but let's pretend they did, and I found it. So the same thing goes on here in the VAN one. All right, and so here it's ngpvan.com, or osdi.ngpvan.com, and then the person's sign up helper. That would normally show up in the AEP that we showed before. And the token. Well, there's a smaller step here too, where we set up the data flows. And so I assigned for the script, the default script, which we saw earlier, is going to have an active data path to both of those peers. So that's being pushed. So now if we go back to the Action Network HAL browser here, let's go back again to the main point. Okay, now here we're going to look at the people collection. We can look at this a few different ways. We could have navigated back to the forum and the submissions collection, but just for simplicity's sake. So here, so this is the people collection. So who have we got here? We've got Jody DeGrain. Who is that? Is that anyone here? Okay, how about? So we'll not worry about that. But yeah, so that's where they went. So we can see it ended up there. And now we're going to take a look inside of VAN and reload this list. And now we should see some of the names here.
Everyone's very excited.
Yeah, so anybody see their name here? Yeah, so there you go. So now basically what happened there is that all these people are now in two places. So the people who are working in the field are now going to hit you up for a phone bank, and then the folks in Action Network who are going to hit you up for a donation, right? Plus, you get the digital team spam.
And so I hope you guys can see how cool this is. With like 5 minutes of setup, you can take an app that's custom built and have it automatically sync with two completely separate CRMs that you might be using. This is something that would have previously been a huge headache because you would have had to integrate with each one individually.
All right, also, just from the developer experience, so those of you who, let's say, learn Python or Ruby, you can go ahead and you can write code in a very simple way. One of the things we've chosen to do is use what's called a hypermedia layer. It's kind of rides on top of REST, and what that does is it allows us to use common libraries like this REST Navigator library in Python, and it makes it really easy, so you don't have to screw around with like curly braces and JSON, like deal with complicated parsing. You can pretty much just pass in the endpoint URL you want to get data from, the API token you'll need to authenticate, and then you basically just ask for resources based on the OSDI names for those collections. So this one here is basically pulling in the people collection from the server, and then from that point on, that's just standard Python code for integrating or iterating a collection. All right, then we're just printing out tab separated values for the data that we got. Same thing in Ruby. There's a library called HyperClient. There's a bunch of choices for these libraries, and you kind of pick whichever one tastes best to you. Same thing, right? We just plug in the URL, the API token, and then we just do that people, each iterator, and then again print out the tab separated values. Pretty simple. So this is going to basically get the latest submissions into the people collection on a given OSDI system.